have to have a drink and welcome everybody. I have to find my goner because that's what I strike my bowls with. G sharp. Yeah. D, G, and 5C sharp. Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates. Yes, someday they will exist, and when you, as a licensed affiliate, catches up to this, you'll know that I had you first and foremost in mind, because you are those who have an official affiliation to the brand. Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates. And it depends on what you do, according to our agreement, underneath that brand. But something simple that you can do is be a presenter, and be a licensed presenter, and operate within the confines of that license that allow you to directly associate yourself with the brand as a presenter. Be on a presenter's list on the web, if it ever comes to that. I'm sure it will someday. And so there's three things today: expressing gratitude, return to life, and what makes you think. We'll see if my notes offer any semblance of continuity of thought. First of all, expressing gratitude. On Facebook, I have a friend that views my live broadcasts named Jonathan, and I'm grateful for Jonathan for a lot of reasons. His own realness of being has developed a simulation of him in my head, like we do for everyone. And the simulation and what's behind it, what's real, is in Jonathan, the person that seeks to do Pilates for themselves without extending it beyond feeling the need to, or the fear of going beyond, just doing Pilates for yourself. So that, as a point of view and a perspective, has helped me keep in mind those students of Pilates that are totally absorbed with being a student and can't imagine ever even, and maybe never will, be an instructor. But the other thing that I'm grateful for from Jonathan is his exposure and reminder of the world of martial arts and the point of view of martial arts, and that in martial arts, okay, these are my thoughts now, but in martial arts, it's like combative. It's about movement between people in a conflict resolution. Is that okay? It's combative in some way. It's interactive between human beings. So it's martial arts, and sort of that's how I think of that whole world of involvement. And then in trying to consider Pilates, which would be better spoken of as contrology, which would be better spoken of as, which would be better spoken of as contrology. Even though I think somebody else has a trademark and a patent and a copyright on that word, and Pilates no longer suffers that, in your discussion of an explanation of Pilates, it would be better spoken of as contrology, because it keeps the target in mind of control. And I'm not done expressing my gratitude yet, but that heads us to return to life. So hold on a second. So Jonathan, thank you for being in my head and reminding of another way of looking at things that's infinitely complex and diverse and subjective, but consistent in some ways that I mentioned that I consider. Would you consider Pilates, or better spoken of as contrology, real arts? Real in that it refers to reality, and it's the interaction of the human being with reality rather than another human, period. Instead of martial arts, where it's interaction and movement between human beings in a conflict resolution orientation, rather than wrestling with another person, you're wrestling with reality. So maybe we call those real arts. Or later on, a fancier word for the same thing, existential arts. Because Pilates is about your existence, and it's about your reaction to your existence. And as a training method, and what you pursue to do, it's movement. And the way you move has everything to do with how well you survive, or if you survive at all. Donald Duck is a very, very old cartoon that calls out Donald, and Donald Duck looks, right? And the next word is duck. So he's looking still when something comes and smashes him in the head, maybe a snowball, but where he didn't duck. Jonathan. So thank you, Jonathan, for keeping martial arts in mind as a perspective and a reflection on Pilates, and that the arts involved in Pilates, as I look at it as about surviving. Joseph Pilates was a survivor. His method is a method about surviving. And the mat work itself is a reflection of reality. And as such, in participating in that choreography, we're training, we're preparing to survive within the stage of that choreography, meaning within reality. To swim like a fish through an ocean of air. And so, in terms of Pilates and real Pilates of being about reality and existential arts, because it's about our existence, it's about our being, it's about our living, it's about our returning to living. So that took me to where we're headed with number 2, after I get done being grateful for Bobby. Bobby is a new friend on Facebook. Who is absorbing what I have to share and by way of knowledge, and I am grateful for her attention and appreciation. We're talking about long spine, and me talking about the core and the criticality of core, and in long spine, how your body is so open that, to me, the fact that your core is an axis running through your hips, and your physiological grasp or grip and control of that axis is so important to make of whatever you make the rest of. You know, it all comes out from in here. We're strongest there. And to the extent that we control the axis of rotation through our hips and understand the dynamic that we are using to do that, meaning that in your imagination, you know that it's a grip at the hip. You know that the grip is an involution. It's a spiral. It's a spiral in of grip to counterbalance the expansion of life opening up. So you're here, you're new, and I talked too long for too much, and I wanted to address you specifically up front to talk about facts, recognition, patron, and surviving. And I know you've got to leave on YouTube. You probably won't even show up, but whoever shows up usually ends up having to leave or hearing what they want to and getting enough of what they want until somewhere along the line they come back to see if the same message is coming out there and if it is as the same as it's always been, and yet in some way gratifying and more a grasp of it to the extent that you're familiar with it, right? This is the carousel going by from left to right as you see it. If you write that way. If you write from right to left, then it's a merry-go-round of exposure going the other way. I know that didn't make much sense. As a way of absorbing information, it comes from repetitive exposure to that information with spaces of time in between. Spaced repetition is the way someone comes to comprehension. And some books, different books say different things about how many times and exposures it takes. But the number that I sort of gravitate towards is, it takes 7 exposures. Think of it, hearing something going by 7 times, and even then, not knowing what everything there is to know about it, right? So in terms of Bobby talking about long spine and how focused the fact of the matter, we're talking about facts, the fact of the matter that the hips are a rotational dynamic, that the core is a grip at the hips. Maybe I'm out of times in my own times, but in 2020 the bulk of the culture isn't there even recognizing the fact of that matter. And that's perhaps to recognize the fact of the matter of the core being a grip at the hips, a rotational dynamic, that it interacts with other rotational dynamics, other axes of that in there being a rotational dynamic, the biological effort of making the grip defines the axis. It's the condition of the grip that defines the axis. But it's in defining the axis, and especially when you get involved in interacting in grips with each other that are in opposition to each other, you implicitly get elongation or pressure away or an extension away of the axes from one another. The eccentric effort. So, Bobby, I hope you stick around for the rest of what I have to say, but I wanted to say thank you for the interaction and hopefully make a distinction between, yes, there's rotation in the knee stretches and in the semicircle and in the short spine, where my point would be recognizing the biomechanics of the body and how the oppositional rotation between axes is a matter of fact. It's the biomechanics of the body, and it's how the body engages itself to move through space. So then, Bobby at patreon.com, patreon.com. If the intensity and the fervor of what you're learning about me about this knowledge you're getting from me, if you'd like to feel the karma of supporting me on a regular basis, $1 a month, 10, 1,000, 10,000 a month, the offer is out there as a means for you to feel the karma of literally supporting the source of the knowledge that's coming to you. And that knowledge is about how to survive as a Pilates instructor or student. So it seems like several times I led into number 2, which is return to life. And here's number 60. Oh yes, okay. And within the title, in parens, what does that mean? So, okay, where am I coming from? The title of Joe's book, Return to Life Through Contrology. Return to life. What does that mean? Right? Well, to me, life means movement. And so it means return to movement, return to moving. And out of wanting to be efficient, there's Alan Herdman again from England, but out of wanting to be efficient, the investment in the movement as a plan to get ready for whatever comes up, ideally would be as efficient as possible. See, if you didn't have to do it, it would be great. If you could just be in great shape all the time without needing to move, think of that. Think of that. But see, the deal is you got to use it or lose it. Quite literally, surviving, living. And so return to life, to me, means return to moving. And in terms of return to Pilates, return to contrology, you return to uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement in the pursuit of that ideal that comes out of the 3 things from Joe's book that we've already gone over ad nauseum. Backing up to now. So, it seems that the moment we're in is a challenging moment to occupy, because we're always preparing for the moment to come, and we're always remembering the moment that was, and having that be so much so in our realm of thinking that in the flow of time I think we're more flooded with memories of what was in the moment, because for it to be a memory it has to have been something that was, kind of thing. I'm not being explicit. And normally in my thoughts I think of the future and how important it is to be in the moment, as though you can anticipate the moment, when really the moment is the moment that you're in, and everything after that is a smear. There you go, there you go. The moment makes a smear. And we're back. And so doing Pilates is like backing up through the smear of your memory into trying to be more present in the moment that you're in. And of course, what makes Pilates magical is that you're pursuing ideal movement and you're listening to your own sensation to give you guidance as to the degree of control that you're exhibiting. I know that was a little vague toward the end, but I think it'll rewind and read. Well, okay, so 60 I got past. So that now we're on even deeper doo-doo. I just had my phone give me a ring. Did you hear that? Fernanda just added to her story. I think it's important to make a distinction between what you present as information on social media. For me, the whole thing about social media was to share my point of view about Pilates, and then it became important to make the distinction between the biomechanics of core new tension and my view of Pilates. Oh, here we go. 80, 85, and then finally 90. So it goes from 80, 85 to 90. Sorry for my mumbling. My normal alarm did not go off this morning, and I woke up surprised that it was 25 minutes later than, actually 35 minutes later than it was meant to go off. And I was so refreshed, and I came out of such a sound sleep, and my body felt so good. Perhaps because I wasn't dragged into thinking so much by responding to the alarm as just emerging out of my sleep without the alarm being part of it. Made for a lot of notes. So, and I'm going to try to repeat all this in Facebook. All right, so number 3. The title is, What Makes You Think? ? Which is a great question all by itself, which is why it became the title. What makes you think? And to what extent can you turn thinking off? And to what extent can you direct your thinking to what you want to think about, rather than where your thinking wants to go in your thinking? Right? The key thing is, I think, to acknowledge that thinking goes on. Thinking is part of being an individual. An individual has a prefrontal cortex, and it works like mad. And so part of thinking is just acknowledging that it exists as a capacity within the human being. And that capacity is difficult to control. And we're after control in Pilates. We're after controlling our being, our thinking, and our observing, and coordinating them in the pursuit of ideal movement in an ideal world for whatever comes up, because we don't know. See? Que sera, sera, which is French, I think, for whatever will be, will be. So, now that let me talk more about different ways to say the same thing or to talk about the same issue. So let me do it from me first. What makes me think that I know what I'm talking about? What makes me think I know what I'm talking about? And you could switch that around just as easily and say, what makes you think that you know what you're talking about? What is the basis of what you know? And what is the extent to which you claim what you know is what there is to be known? In negotiating the sale of a domain name of mine, I had someone tell me that they had this many years in the business doing this. And in that regard, I think it was saying that I'm claiming my experience as authority. That's very good. I'm claiming my experience as authority. We all do that, right? Okay, let's say that's, and so, in that regard, it's also a claim on time of exposure, how long you've been doing this, right? Let's say, a metaphor has been running through my head lately. Let's say you're a train, you run a train, you're a conductor on a train. You know, and you've done it from the ground up. You know everything there is to know about that train. And you've been dealing with it and working with it to keep that locomotive working and doing its job, moving. Now, that person can say, I've got 20 years on locomotives as experience on knowing what they know. And that's totally true. And yet someone that at the beginning of that 20 years had the ability and the opportunity and the capacity to go to school and learn how locomotives are designed, can not only learn how they've been designed, but then improve on design and claim 6 years of study and production of new models of what someone claims experience in. Knowledge. And so, what makes me think I know what I know is because what I know that I want you to know is knowledge about an explanation of Pilates that doesn't come from folklore. It's not based on lineage and the whole group of people that worked with Joe that through their word of mouth have passed on their knowledge. That's a kind of knowledge, and that takes me toward my ending. Good. an assertion of how long you've been doing something often is the basis of claiming legitimacy in what you do. And to a large extent, it has a base of legitimacy in it, but that's not everything there is in any field. And as true in Pilates as well, sad but true, the inconvenient truth is that you can go beyond what word of mouth has to offer and all the folklore has to give, and look to and for and, I think, find an explanation of Pilates. And from that explanation allows you to design, not just recreate from what's given to you from others, but to design on your own, based on the reality that your explanation takes into account. So where are we? We're headed right there. We're headed right there. Yeah. I've spoken a lot recently about the two things I want you to have are both knowledge. There's CT knowledge and there's MMP knowledge. One is about biomechanics and the other is a point of view of Pilates. CT stands for core new tension. MMP stands for Michael Miller Pilates. That's just a brand, a view of Pilates. But CT is about biophysics, biomechanics, is about how the body uses its muscles, engages itself to move. And how that happens is universal to the organism of the human being. So CT is just pointing out what's already there. And has been for a very long time. It's your understanding of how the body engages in core new tension that truly gives you the kind of control you're after in the performance of Pilates. And so another fellow instructor is warming up to make a presentation about knowledge and wisdom, which is fascinating. I encourage you all to go. And because I'm always talking about folklore, word of mouth knowledge, and theory, explaining knowledge, an explanation of what it is, rather than just a body of knowledge that pursues recreation or historical reenactment, in the open admission that, or the choice to ignore any explanation at all of what it is for what it is, because it undermines the whole structure of aristocratic presumption of authority based on lineage. And a lot of that, of course, is based on time and how soon you showed up and all of that. So, something about it's having access to resources, and then an individual uses their will and exposes themselves to those resources, and from that exposure gains experience that builds your knowledge. It's from your knowledge of what you know that you make use of what you have. And why are we doing this? The whole idea is surviving, right? Joseph Pilates was a survivor. His method is survival training. The jungle is gravity. Jungle is gravity. So, my point is that in talking about surviving, where does that go to? That goes to me encouraging you to enjoy making an offer. Enjoy saying, I can explain CT and MMP for $2 in 2 minutes. Paid up front. Offer expires if it's not taken up upon immediately. And then if you get paid, like if you sell a ticket to a movie, you make a presentation, you make sure it ends on the time that you allotted for the presentation, and then you're done. Know the joy in making an offer, because it allows you extend to another person a degree of involvement that they may not want. They don't want anything that's not for free, but they may be willing to pay for something if it were valuable. And time with you is always valuable, no matter what you talk about, no matter what you say. Because people really want more of you, no matter what it is you're passionate about. I encourage you to enjoy being passionate about explaining what makes Pilates Pilates, and explaining how your body engages itself to move through space. And that explanation, the CT and MMP, just two things. You don't have to know it all at all. You just have to be paid in advance for you to share your explanation of what you're passionate about on those two subjects. And of course, the better you can explain it, the better it'll come off, and the more people will want to know, and not just go to the movie, but come have you teach them more, to the point of actually becoming students, and you becoming an instructor. And so there's presenting, teaching, and instructing. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, connect the dots, evaluate points of view, and then know how to make an offer, and find the joy in being paid to share what you value. Value for value. Direct your thinking. Geist.